time to shake out your money-making truth. You're listening to Soul Wisdom Abundance with Jennifer Bloome, creating wealth from spiritual health on TransformationTalkRadio.com. Have you ever wondered why some people work really hard for their money while others live lives of joy and abundance with seemingly little effort? You are about to learn powerful, tangible steps to shifting your mindset and connecting to your flow of money and abundance. Jennifer teaches you to connect to who you are at a soul level and how to use that connection to create a personal and specific relationship with money. Learn how money is a powerful tool to achieve your desires and your desires to then serve the world. So shake out your money-making truth right now. Soul Wisdom Abundance with Jennifer Bloome.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jennifer Bloome, host of Soul Wisdom Abundance, Create Wealth Through Spiritual Health here on Transformation Talk Radio. And I'm super delighted to have you joining me, whether this is the first time you've tuned in or whether you've been with me for the last, I guess it's been about a year and a half now. Again, whether you're here for the first time or whether you've been multiple times, welcome. I'm really glad to be sharing this space with you and sharing conversation with you around money. Money is a pain point for many of us, and there are lots of ways that we can shift how we do money, shift how we think about money, shift how we interact with money so that it becomes a tool for us that we can rely on and a tool that has peace and abundance surrounding it as opposed to fear and worry. And the way that I do this personally is really thinking about money at that energetic level and helping people heal and awaken first and then heal their soul money relationship. Because when we do that, we start interacting with money at that soul level, which it's a complete game changer. And it allows us to work with money in a really conscious way. And it allows us to have this relationship that we've never had before with money. Typically, before we really understand about relationship and money, we are working with money through the lens of our past experiences, which tends to have a lot of pain and suffering and wounding around it. Whether it's big wounds or little wounds, we all tend to have times when money hasn't felt like it's supported us. And when we create through that lens, all we get is a little bit more suffering and a little bit more pain. So today and on all podcasts, it's really about how do I shift into this much more conscious view and working with money. Now, I usually, for those of you who have listened in before, you'll know I usually do this show with a guest. But there's a concept that I have been thinking a lot about recently, and I wanted to do a deep dive on it. So I am solo today. You get me for the full hour. And I'm really looking forward to it because it's going to give us a chance to, like I said, take a deep dive into a concept that is really important when it comes to making this shift in money. So let me lay some groundwork here. Let me lay a little bit of foundation. When we start to think about making money and creating money energetically, there are lots of ways that we can look at creating money in the moment, right? We talk about manifestation, we talk about creation tools, and that's fantastic, right? All those tools are amazing. They are in my toolbox. I use them on a regular basis. And yet it really is all about creating something now. And we, as we use the tool, we create it, it's great, it's here, and then it's gone, right? We put it in a savings account, or we take a vacation, or we invest it, something, and then there's more money to be made. And of course, we can only create in each present moment. But when we are focused on what that tool is going to be to create that next amount of money, I find that I start hearing from people about reaching for that again, for new tools. What's next? What's bigger? What's better? What's grander? What's gonna work this time? And it doesn't really ever shift the feeling state, where it sort of feels like we're in this cycle of always needing something more. When I speak about doing money in a new way, what I really want each of you to know how to do is to create lasting peace when it comes to thinking about money. And of course, I want there to be lasting abundance as well. Yes. But what would it be like to be able to take off that mental load that we all tend to carry with us about money? What would it be like to let go of that monkey mind around money, or to let go of that constant buzz in the back of your head that says, is there going to be enough? Is there enough? What should I do? How can I make more? The way that we get to this point is to make an internal shift in what we know about money first, and then our bank accounts can change. The energetic shift that we're looking for isn't necessarily a manifestation technique or a creation technique. It's an internal shift. And then as that internal shift happens, we get something new externally in our bank account. And there are a number of internal shifts that we get to make in order to get to this new place with money. One of the things I've talked a lot about on this podcast before is the shift from thinking about money as purely transactional, meaning I work 40 hours and I get a paycheck, or I get a new client and I get money in my PayPal account, or I want something from the store, so I go and I exchange money for it, right? That's transactional, and that is one aspect of money. But the other I shouldn't say more important, that was where the language was going to go, but the bigger truth about money is that it is relational. And that's where I start talking about the soul money relationship, right? So that's something that I've talked a lot about on the podcast. And I want to talk about another internal shift today. And that internal shift is to shift from thinking about ourselves as makers of money to receivers of money. So I'm just going to ask you to pause in your thinking for a second and listening, and ask the question, kind of say this short sentence to yourself. I make money, I receive money. And just notice what feels more accurate to you. And that's what today's episode is all about, is making that shift from believing that making is more accurate to feeling the truth of being a receiver of money. When we understand about that receiving process, we gain so much more, I want to use the word control, which isn't part of the picture, but we trust. That's the word I'm reaching for. When we understand about being receivers, it allows us a deeper trust of the flow of money. And I'll be transparent here. This is an area that I'm really working with right now. I know it intellectually like the back of my hand. I can give you all of the energetics behind it, and I've seen how it works in my life, and I'm really ready to step into it in a new way so that it becomes really that automatic thinking. And in fact, I recently I joined a group, an organization, where the whole point of it is to practice giving or gifting and receiving. Everybody takes a turn being the gifter, and then everybody takes a turn being the receiver. And at the end, we all end up with more than we've gifted. It's a really, on the surface, it feels like this really fantastic, magical kind of thing, and it is. And it's also really educational. It's bringing all my stuff to the surface about what I think about receiving. And some of them are kind of sneaky. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about receiving versus making money. The place to start in this conversation, and I thought about this a lot before we started the broadcast today, because there's a lot of places that we could make the entrance into this conversation. But the easiest place, I think, is to start by reminding all of us that money itself, the actual currency of money, is a currency of the divine. And if you've done any sort of study on the sacred aspects of money, this is not new, but it's a really important reminder. Money is it's a tangible, physical representation, a tangible, physical resource of the divine. All of it, any of it, no matter where the money is in the world or how it got to those people or how it got to you, that's its origin. And the divine brings money to you through the resources of other people, right? It's not like God, nature, divinity, whatever your name is for the higher power, standing out on the street corner handing out dollar bills, right? That money flows through the resources of other people. But each of us here on the planet, because we're part of the divine, we have a birthright to the unlimited resource of the divine. And of course, money is one of those resources. Our jobs, in terms of being able to receive those resources, is to be open and receptive to the ways that we can work with divinity to receive the money. So that, and we'll go into a little bit more depth about this in a moment, but that's the basic idea around receiving. And I'm curious to have you just check in with yourself and notice, are you getting tweaked in any way when you start hearing all of that? Right? Because our culture is much more focused on the making. We need to make money. We need to make our way. We need to prove ourselves through the amount of money that we as individuals are making. Right? There's this whole idea that somehow we are proving our worth through however much money we're able to bring into our experience. As I was putting this together, one of the things I started thinking about was, how many times have you heard about someone who is considered to be part of a wealthy family, and you think about that person, you're like, oh yeah, they have money, but it's just family money. They didn't do anything to earn it. They didn't do anything to make it. So there's this connotation that they don't deserve it. And then of course, there's all kinds of assumptions about who that person's going to be because of the way money came into their experience. And, we have so many stories like that about stories or beliefs, maybe is an even better word. We have so many beliefs about what the right way is to have money. And as individuals, we need to be really responsible for our making of that money. I have a personal example of this. I was in a mastermind. It's been 10, 12 years now. And this was back, I have 3 kids, and my kids were young at that time. I can't remember, they were in elementary and middle school. And we were talking in the mastermind about what our goals were for business and money, and why we wanted the money that we wanted. And I said, I wanted to be able to fund my kids' college education. And what was really amazing to me was it was an outcry from this group of women. And I can't remember now how many of us there were, 15 maybe. And almost to a person, they were saying, why would you want that as a goal? You don't want your kids spoiled. And I heard story after story about how they went to school with people whose parents had paid for their college, and they didn't ever work hard, and they skated by, and they themselves had to earn the money and pay their way through, so they really valued their education, blah 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 blah. And what was funny is that my parents paid for my college education. I was very fortunate, and I did not just skate by. I graduated cum laude from Mount Holyoke College, right? I worked hard. I had a degree, a science-based degree. right? I wasn't a slacker because my parents paid for my education. But again, it was this illustration of the immediacy of what people would say about earning your way through, right? The only way that you could possibly get what you needed out of a college education was to have to earn the money. And of course, we can all think of people, I know there were people in my class who, my class in college whose parents paid for their education. They had a different experience, but it wasn't because of the money. There was something else. And we give money so many attributes that it really doesn't deserve, right? We are the containers that receive this neutral energy that is money. It's our character, our makeup, who we are as an individual that determines how we use the tool of money. And again, we've made up the story that we have to work hard to earn the money, or we're going to end up spoiled, or we're going to end up not getting what we're not going to learn the lessons that we need to learn in order to be good people. Right? Do people end up demonstrating, quote, spoiled behavior when they have money? Yeah. But there are a lot of people on this planet who have family money who aren't spoiled. And again, that is just one belief, one attribute that we put towards money. And I'm going to ask you to notice what's coming up for you as I share this, right? Notice any sensations in your body. We tend to have a lot of body sensations when we're thinking about money. When something that we don't believe to be true is being said, we can feel that tightening in our bellies or maybe in our heart centers. So just take any information that's coming to you from your body or thoughts that are coming up in your mind and just notice them. And then you get to ask whether they're true with a capital T. Okay? So just keep that sort of in the back of your mind as I continue to go through, right? Energetically speaking, we are hardwired to be receivers, not makers. Right? So we are hardwired to be receivers, not makers. And that has a lot of advantages. Divinity has the million-mile view of everything that's going on the planet. And when we ask for something, it has the ability to move things around to create situations where we get to receive through the resources of other people in ways we could never imagine. So let me give you a few examples of what I mean really by receiving, because those resources could come through ideas. They could come through reading something, asking a question and then reading something in a book or hearing something on a radio or a podcast. And then that gets us off and moving. So let me give you a few examples. So I run a regular group on Fridays around prosperity. And every week the process, the way that it works is people check in and then I give some new content and then we check in about how that new content landed for them and their experiences, et cetera, et cetera. And then we just keep deepening into it over the week and then there's new content the next Friday. So a couple of weeks ago, I sat down getting ready for my Friday group. And every time, it was the weirdest sensation. Every time I would go to try to write something on the page, I literally couldn't move my hand. And I kept getting this sort of blank slate feeling like, don't do it. And I thought, okay, so we're just going to show up and stare at each other like, what's going to happen? I thought, okay, fine. All right, Divine, I'm listening. And I showed up and everybody started doing their check-in. And the first person who shared said she was not doing great and that she was considering not showing up because she was really full to the brim and didn't think she could absorb anything new, but that she'd made an agreement to show up for this group. So she did. And it was funny. We chuckled. I said, "Oh, that's very interesting. I must have been feeling your energy because I couldn't come up with new content. This was going to be a question and answer kind of thing today." And what it turns out, every person in the group, minus one, was in the exact same space. So I listened to everybody. We did it. I created an exercise on the spot, and it was exactly what was needed. If I had been in that space of feeling like I needed to make something happen in the group, I wouldn't have heard, right? I wouldn't have listened, and the moment would have been missed. And it was a really powerful moment for all of us. So that's one example of receiving information, right? Something I couldn't possibly have known before, I was able to receive information about. So let me give a couple of examples specifically around money. This first one is a personal, also my husband. We've been married for over 30 years. So this is a long time ago. But when he and I first got married, we both just graduated from college. I was in school to be an occupational therapist, and he finished school in industrial organizational psychology. He was having a hard time finding a job. And so he basically was like, well, we were a young couple, married, needed money. So, and I was in school. So he was doing whatever he needed to do. And he did some really crappy jobs. He was a door-to-door insurance salesman. He was a courier, right? I mean, just all the things that you do because you have to do them. But he got to the point where he realized, hey, it's not just about doing what needs to be done. There's really something out there for me that I could really enjoy. And he ended up starting at a call center where he used his background in computers to begin to people who were using the software that his company provided. And as he was there and he gained experience and he got really excited about, hey, I'm really using my skills, he ended up moving into a new position that he'd never heard of before. But he became part of their sales team, and he was the technology resource on the team. And again, this is something that it wasn't a job that he was ever aware of. It wasn't something he was reaching for. It became possible through this because of where he was working. And what was funny about it is that there for a while, I thought he was laundering money over there. He came home with a salary that was twice what he was making in the call center. And then the next day he came home and he said, hey, I get a quarterly bonus because of the, no extra work, just because of the work I do, I get a bonus. And then he came home and he said, you know what? I get a travel adder, which meant that they added money every month to compensate for gas. He would have been driving, except for the sales reps usually drove. So he didn't ever have to use it. So that was just one more piece. And then he came home and he said, they do sales contests. And look at this. And he pulled out two $1,000 American Express traveler's checks. Of course, that dates me also. We don't do traveler's checks anymore. $2,000. And the reason I'm sharing all of this with you is a couple of reasons. One of which that when I think about receiving, that's the most magical way I can think of, right? That's one of the most magical experiences I've ever had around receiving. Even though it was coming through him, it was like next day was more money. Next day was, and it was just beyond belief, right? Because neither one of us knew it. And he ended up in this position because he made a decision that he wanted something more. And then he opened and he listened and allowed himself to be guided to a place that he couldn't have, that it wasn't part of his original degree. It was part of a skill set that he used when he was working part-time during college. And then it led him into a new space. So that, again, is a way of, right? While he was showing up, he was still receiving. And then finally, one last way of speaking about receiving, and this, I think I shared this on an episode earlier, but for those of you who haven't heard it, I had a client and I recently reconnected with her. This is somebody I was in another mastermind with. I reconnected with her, and at the time, we had worked through some issues around her working hard for money and that kind of thing. And she said after the work that we did, she ended up having a conversation with a friend who said, you have a really great house. And this friend happened to work for an ad agency. And so the friend asked her, would it be okay if we borrowed your house for the weekend? And she ended up being paid multiple thousands of dollars for this company to come in and do an ad shoot. And it was something she could never have orchestrated. It was something that she could never have in a million years thought that that was going to be a way money was going to come in, but she didn't have to work at it, right? So receiving is about being present, it's about listening, and it's about acting. And I'm going to touch on this real quickly, and then we'll, after we take a break, I'll I'll talk about it a little bit more. But I think that people get confused around receiving, thinking that it's just about sitting on the couch and money falling from the sky. And that's not at all what this is about. It is about taking that time of stillness and really listening and honoring that part of ourselves that is wired to be a receiver. And then as we receive, we take action. Okay. So we will talk a little bit more, like I said, about that in just a moment. But for now, it is time to take a quick break. You're listening to Soul Wisdom Abundance with me, Jennifer Bloome, your host. And let's take a quick break. And when we get back, we'll talk just a little bit more about action. And then I want to take you all through an exercise. All right, so stay tuned. See you soon. So hello, we're back on Soul Wisdom Abundance with me, your host, Jennifer Bloome. And we have been talking about receiving and the difference between being a receiver of money or a maker of money. And this is one of those really important concepts to start to deepen into your system, to really embody, because this is it's a huge part of being able to turn money from something that is just really pain in the butt, for lack of a better term, into something that you can really trust the flow of and begin to feel that lasting sense of peace. So before the break, I just started talking about the action part of the journey. I think so often that when we are looking at the energetics of creating money, when we're looking at the magical resources that we all have access to, it gets really confusing to know, okay, well, what's my job in all of this? If it's not my job to push and strive and suffer and all of that, what is my job? How do I play my part? Is it just my part to kind of palms up and just let things fall into it? It's confusing, and we don't have a lot of models to talk about it. But as I said, action is always going to be part of the equation. We're human. It's a 3D planet. We're physically based. There are always things that we're going to be doing, but it's a matter of knowing. The best way for me to talk about it is, how is your action being sourced? And I use that word very specifically as one of the words of the divine. But how are we sourcing our action? Are we sourcing our action through inspiration? Right? Are we hearing those, like when I was trying to create that group and kept my hand literally not being able to move, right? Are we acting out of inspiration, or are we acting out of fear? Are we acting out of trust, or are we acting out of guilt? A really great analogy to start thinking about is an engine. And I am in no way a mechanically oriented person, but engine is the best. It's really the best analogy that I can come up with. And you get to ask yourself, what's the engine that's driving the creation of my money? Have I calibrated that engine to the process of making? And again, where we are driving, pushing, striving, working 100-hour weeks, using money as a measuring stick? Or are you calibrating your engine to receiving money? Both engines need fuel, and that fuel is action, but the output is going to be much different. And I think that this is really on the minds of a lot of people. I was scrolling through, I can't remember if it was Facebook or Instagram a couple of months ago. Yeah, I guess it's been about that long. And I saw somebody's post and it was so heartfelt. And she said, look, I am tired of being resilient. And I'm tired of being lauded for being resilient. I want somebody to, I want to have a softer approach. I want to be able to say that I'm being lauded for this more ease instead of something that has made me prove how strong I am. And while resilience is important in so many different ways, right? We don't want to be somebody that has a quote failure, or when something doesn't turn out the way that we want it to or need to, that we stop. But we've turned resilience into this monster characteristic that we get to, it's sort of the way we compare ourselves. How resilient am I versus how resilient is somebody else? And that's one of the concepts, one of the areas that we get to do some release work so that we can shift out of this doing, making model and more into an allower receiver model. And that's a really big question of how we do that. But one thing I would offer to you is to say, what is it that we're really celebrating when somebody is resilient? What are we really celebrating when somebody pushes hard and keeps going and keeps going and keeps going and keeps going, and then there's a creation at the end? What we're really celebrating is to use energy terms, is the expansion of that person, right? They had an idea, they sat with it, they did the work, they created, and they, in the end, came out with something on the other side that was new. And so, but what we do as a culture is, instead of really celebrating what they've created, we celebrate, right? We're celebrating the effort that they put into it, right? We're celebrating their struggle. And we can create expansion without the struggle. And that's where receiving comes in. If we allow ourselves to release that cloak of, I have to make something happen, I have to prove it, I have to figure it all out, this hard work is going to pay off one day, and instead step into the trust that all of that is true, and yet we get to do it with divine assistance, so that we're being led from place to place to place to place and create our expansion. But we're doing it in a way that allows so much more joy and so much more peace and trust that things are going to continue. When we allow ourselves to be in this receiving model, as I said, trust becomes our companion. every time we listen to something that we receive, listen to an idea and follow it and have something happen that is a positive experience, we're able to trust that it's going to come again and again and again. And if we allow our self-worth to be tied, well, I don't want to go down that road because self-worth really isn't tied to anything. Self-worth is we're worthy because we're of divinity. But if we can praise ourselves for the listening to what we received, as opposed to praising ourselves for the hours of hard work, and we get used to that new sort of praise, we're going to encourage more and more messages from the divine. And trust in money is a huge concept, right? It's a huge area where there's lots of places to trip and fall around trusting money, because many of us have had experiences where we haven't been able to trust money, or we did something and we thought money was going to come in and it didn't, or we lost an amount of money, or we had a pay cut or a layoff, right? So many places where we've had pain points, and we start to become wary of those pain points. We take action from this place of fear that those pain points are going to come. Instead, when we're in that receiving model, we get to be in that space of trust that money flows, that we are of divinity, that we have limitless money, that there are limitless resources. I was talking to a client of mine a little bit ago, and she, just like so many of us during COVID, many people had their businesses take a turn in a direction that wasn't what we wanted. And she was talking though about her clients, and she said, what I realized is that I was relying on clients for the money. And when those clients went away, I was afraid that I wasn't ever going to receive money again. But what I'm starting to understand, she said, is that those clients aren't the source of my money. The divine is. The divine didn't go anywhere during COVID, right? There was just new ways for the divine to come through. So she was able to step into a new place of trust that money was coming her way, even though it was going to look completely different because there weren't these clients available. That's the shift that I'm talking about. That's going to bring peace, because she was able to relax at that point. She was able to say, I don't know what it's going to look like. And I also know that I'm of divinity. The divine is on this unlimited resource, and money is going to flow. Right? All right. So I've done a lot of talking, as is wont to happen during a solo podcast show. What I want to do is switch gears just a little bit, and I would like to take us through an exercise that will be able to have you start to think about who you are in relationship to being a receiver or a maker of money. And I will take this opportunity to say, before I step into the exercise, that if you're resonating with this conversation, if receiving is an area that is something that you really want to know more about, and you can already start to feel that there are parts of you that don't quite know how to do that, I am working on several new programs that are going to help to bring all of us into a new place with receiving. And so if you would like to know about those programs, like I said, they're in the works, but the best way to know about those programs is to connect with me on Instagram. I'm at soul.abundance on Instagram, or you can come to my website and take the Soul Money Relationship quiz, and that also brings you into my community. So you'll get to know more about the programs as they come in. All right. And of course, you can always drop me an email. I'm more than happy to chat with you about that. And you can see those, you can find ways to connect with me in the show notes. All right. So with that being said, let's do a little bit of internal work with an exercise. So if you're someplace where you can close your eyes, I'm going to invite you to do that. If you're driving, please don't. You can just connect, or you can save this part of the episode for a later time. So again, if you can get your eyes closed, go ahead and close them, taking a couple of nice deep breaths. Going to ask divine intelligence to integrate body and soul. Align your earth star and your heaven star so that your energetic channel becomes nice and straight. And then imagine that you can drop your thinking mind, your conscious mind, down into your heart center. And you don't have to worry about the how. Simply ask, and it'll happen. So imagine you can take a couple of breaths here from your heart center. And then I'm going to ask you to connect with your soul. You can do that via your soul language team if you know your soul languages. Or you can simply ask divine intelligence to connect you with your soul. And let's ask a few questions. And the first is, what does making money mean to you? What are the first thoughts that come up to you when you ask, what does making money mean? And I'll just pause for a moment or two. And if you need some more space, if you're not listening to this as it's being broadcast, its first broadcast, you can just pause me for a moment. And then let's ask the next question, which is, what does receiving money mean to you? What are the connotations that come up for you when you think about receiving money? And then the next question, which you can direct to your soul, which is, how do I fuel how I create my money? Am I fueling it from a place of making or proving or doing or needing or measuring or worthiness? Or am I fueling my creation from a place of receiving? Right, this goes back to the engine example that I shared before. What's the fuel that you're putting into your creation engine? And the next question, what are the underlying rules I need to follow to feel comfortable having money flow into my account? And you may notice some thoughts coming up, and you may want to say, oh yeah, no, that's not right. That's not right. I know what a lot of these questions, we know what the answers are supposed to be. If you've done some spiritual work, right, you know what the answer is supposed to be to this question, but that's not what we're asking here. It's not what I'm asking here. I'm asking you to check in with your soul so that it can share with you what's getting in the way of your flow. So again, the question is, what are the underlying rules I need to follow to feel comfortable having money flow into my account? Okay, next question. Imagine that you are out walking in your backyard or in a park, some area that's out in nature and is yours that you can connect with, and you find a money fountain. And this money fountain flows as strongly, as long, whatever it is that you need. You know how to work this money fountain. In fact, you know how to work it so well that you don't have to work anymore. You just are receiving from this money fountain. A couple of questions to ask about that. How does it feel in your body to think about just sort of having this magic source of money It's available only for you. And then what would it be like to start telling people that you have a magic source of money that you never have to work again? What comes up in your body? What comes up in your mind? Seems like it'd be a really cool idea. But what's really going on in that, about that for you? Just another couple of questions here. So let's shift gears just a little bit and ask the question, who do you want to be with money? Given this whole conversation that we've had today about receiving versus making, who do you want to be with money? And do you trust that if you be that way with money, that you'll have everything that you need? And then final question, ask divine intelligence to create a connection between you and money, the actual energy of money. What does it want to share with you? What are the truths that money wants to share with you? Okay. So again, you can put me on pause if you need a little bit more time with those questions. And then when you're finished, let's thank money. Thank your soul. Then bring yourself back into the present moment, taking a nice deep breath. Bring your consciousness back up into your mind if you want. And my invitation to you is to pause and to reflect on what came up. Notice what your rules are. Notice all of those unwritten laws, unwritten feeling states, unwritten things that you believe about what needs to happen in order for you to trust money to flow. All of those rules, regulations, beliefs are what I call your receiving contract. This is a term that came up for me as I started this deeper embodiment work of receiving. And all I mean by receiving contract is that we every one of us, and we start experiencing money pre-birth, actually, as our parents experience the stress and strain of money that is transmitted chemically through to us, that feeling of stress and strain. As we're small children, as we grow up, money, we're living on a 3D planet. There's no way to escape it. We have some sort of experience with money. And that contributes to this new understanding of what we have to do to have money. So instead of coming out with this innate knowing, right? We come with an innate knowing that we are divinity, that we have access to unlimited resources, and yet everything that's happening in our world around us is telling us something different. So we accidentally end up creating this receiving contract. And those are all rules that are embedded within our subconscious. They are embedded within our body. And this warrants a deeper conversation, but I'm just going to mention it here. And that is that even when we have rules that consciously we know are inaccurate, if they're still part of that receiving contract, if they're still embedded within our system, we're not going to feel safe unless we're following them. Our neurosystem is going to feel really scrambled if we try to do something outside of that contract. And what you just did in answering all these questions is started to figure out, hey, what's going on in my receiving contract? And we don't have to hold on to any of those rules. We get to create whatever rules we want to have. But we have to know, first of all, that we're operating by a set of rules that we weren't aware of. And we have to give ourselves permission to be able to change those rules into something new. The more we change those rules, the more we're able to feel that sense of safety within our body, which is going to allow us to move forward. And like I said, this is part of a bigger conversation. My guest next week and I are going to talk all about this concept, about being dysregulated within the nervous system and why we need to quiet that first before we start to make other changes within our consciousness. But I want to make that aware here. Make you aware of it here, that all these things that are coming up are pieces of the puzzle, sharing with you why you haven't been able to make a change in what's actually coming into your bank account. Because if you have a rule that says, I need to prove my worth through my effort, and you're trying to do a manifestation technique that's going to bring you money without effort, it's a clash in your consciousness, and it's never going to work for you. There will be sort of this back-sided, back-ended sabotage, which makes it sound more nefarious than I mean it to, but there's a clash going on with your system. The bottom line is you can change it. As you become aware of the rules, you get to change into being a receiver rather than a maker. You get to go back to your original programming. You get to go back to being in alignment and receiver of the unlimited resources of divinity. And when you do that, you have this ability to have an incredible amount of peace around money, and you get to have a more constant flow of money, which can come from so many different directions. That's another conversation to have. We think that money has to only come through the work we do in the world, and yet there are thousands of ways, thousands of vortices that the universe can bring money to you. Okay. All right. So I think that's enough content for the day. I'm really excited. I would love to hear what comes up for each of you as you listen to this information and process. We'll be exploring more on further podcasts. And like I said, there are other programs that are coming on my end. So I'm just so delighted that you were here. And if there is a way that I can help you begin to shift through all of this, I would love to do that. One really great tool to start is to take a look at the Soul Money Relationship Quiz that I've got on my website, jenniferbloome.com. And it's going to help you understand these bigger shifts that I'm sharing with you. All right. So Soul Wisdom Abundance is here the first and third Friday of every month. As I said, next episode, we will be talking about the nervous system and dysregulation and how to get regulated so you can start making all the conscious changes that you want. And that will be a fantastic conversation. Can't wait to hold that. And until then, everyone, have a fantastic couple of weeks. Take good care, prosperous blessings. I will see you then.
Thank you for listening to Soul Wisdom Abundance with Jennifer Bloome, creating wealth from spiritual health on transformationtalkradio.com. To learn more about Jennifer Bloome or listen to past shows, visit jenniferbloome.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on any of your favorite podcasting outlets. Simply search Soul Wisdom Abundance with Jennifer Bloome.